Welcome to the Shadow-Caste. My name's Jan.
And I'm Paul. Glad to have you back. It's been a couple of weeks for us.
Yeah, we had a little pause, different things going on in the lives, but we're glad to be back.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, you know something? I was really pondering this idea that what I don't see a lot of content on out there and a lot of commentary on is I see a lot of people get involved in these debates and they take two sides of the issue and then, man, shit just goes wrong, right? Everybody's just got to be right, and they just get into these sort of stupid arguments about...
Well, and people don't think things through, and people don't research things, and they just kind of go with what they've thought all their lives.
Yeah, right. And then, you know, so I thought my two things this week are both regarding two sides of the story, and hopefully I would love to just sort of dive in with you and sort of think, like, what is there a way that we can reconcile two different viewpoints? And so this one is entitled Capitalism versus Socialism, and already by the very nature of the fact that you're like trying to polarize everybody, right? Like there's such a thing as pure capitalism, right, such a thing as pure socialism, that never the twain shall meet. But nonetheless, we have Ben Shapiro, who's you know, in some way he's a smart. You know what I think Ben's great skill is he's able to recite data. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily mean, I think that means you're smart. I just think it means you've got a great memory. And he just has statistics.
And the gift of gab.
He talks of statistics. But let's watch a little bit.
Okay.
So when President Biden looks into the microphone and says, pay your fair share, what does that mean?
It means that if you're one of the 55 corporations that literally paid absolutely nothing in federal income taxes in 2020, and in fact received $3.5 billion in tax refunds or rebates, or tax refunds, I should say, maybe you should pay your fair share. But here's the thing, if the tax code is written in a way where corporations can legally take advantage of loopholes and incredibly low effective corporate tax rates, they're gonna do it, right? So it's one thing to say pay your fair share, it's another thing to actually write a tax code that is a little more equitable and ensures that everyone is in fact paying their fair share.
Ben, what's pay your fair share mean?
I mean, the obvious answer would be a flat tax, but the longer answer is that the United States has one of the most progressive income tax systems on planet Earth. Most of the systems in, for example, Northern Europe are far less progressive. The top tax rate kicks in a lot lower on the income scale because you have to pay for the large-scale social services. The people who are at the top of the income bracket in the United States, the top quintile, essentially pays all net taxes in the United States. Not some, not most, all. And the reason for that is because there are tax transfers, and the transfer of payments that are inherent in public services do not accrue to the people at the top of the tax bracket. They accrue to everybody else who's receiving that sort of funding. When we talk about higher taxes on corporations, we do not have one of the world's lowest corporate tax rates. We are somewhere in the middle. Look at the OECD countries. We are certainly not the lowest on the totem pole in terms of our corporate tax rate. In fact, right-wing sources like the Heritage Foundation will say that it is much friendlier to do business in places like Denmark or Sweden in many cases than it is to do business in the United States.
Tax rate's pretty high in Denmark and Sweden.
The notion that corporations ought to be paying tax at all, in my view, is mistaken, given the fact that the income is immediately either reinvested in the company or passed on to people who immediately pay all of that tax. By the time you actually receive your income in this country, the income's been taxed about 7 different ways. Right? You're getting taxed through the corporation, then it's passed on to you as salary, which is taxed. If you invest it in the stock market and then you sell your stock, that is taxed as capital gains tax. When you die, the government taxes that as well. So how many times can you tax the same dollar before people begin to disinvest?
Ooh, you got a big...
you got to wait for that applause. Yeah.
Got a big round of applause. So that's basically, I think, the two... Here's these guys sort of arguing both sides of this,
right.
this point, right? And I mean, my personal view is, well, first of all, I think they're both just sort of falling for the trap, which is that in all politics, the issues are only for us. They're not for them. The Democrats don't believe that the rich should be taxed, and the Republicans don't believe that there should be lower taxes. They don't give a fuck about any of that. They just want to give us stuff to argue about, right? So all political discourse, all political debates really are just a way for for those in control to divide us and create these divisions so that we think I'm a one-party voter and I believe in the companies should have better taxes and that's the ground of the Republicans and so I vote Republican or whatever, abortion or whatever issue we are fed as a difference is only our issue. It's not. It's we emotionally care, right? We think it matters to us. It doesn't matter to either party because they're both controlled by the same group, the same cartel. They don't have does anybody really think, if you think about it logically, I mean, my thinking is Joe Biden really gonna, he's, how many years has he already been in office now, right? He hasn't created a pay your fair share. It's just bullshit, right? It's just a bullshit story that lets him sound like he's in favor of the people, right? He's not.
I do agree that dividing the people is the most important part. I do also believe that those, in government and who are controlling, who are behind the scenes, like the Wizard of Oz controlling government and stuff, do care about how much money they keep in their pockets and all that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah. That's true.
And I also believe that there is no pure socialism and there's no pure capitalism. So we're not really arguing, the apple versus the orange. But on the tax thing, I wish I would have had a minute to update myself on the Biden tax proposal. Because when I was researching another topic for another podcast we did, I came across a guy who was really crazy upset about this new tax proposal that Biden had. Mm-hmm. And this was after, it was what Biden had in place, and then it was after they nominated Kamala to be the presidential candidate, and Biden stepped down. They'd had a month to redo all this stuff, and they still left everything as Biden's policy, Biden's presidency. They didn't replace Kamala with any of the thing, but the it's a shockingly strict and revolutionary. It's the biggest tax hike since 1920 or something like that. And Biden was proposing to tax capital gains that you hadn't realized yet, like you have money in the stock market and the stock market is up now. You haven't cashed out that stock and you're not like normal times paying the capital gains on it. They want to tax you on the fact that it went up, even though you didn't sell it.
But again, I think that the reality of that is that it gives the president, now Kamala, some position to stand on a stage and say, I'm for the regular people like you.
Right. Oh, sure.
But they all know that there's no way fucking Congress is going to pass that. And it's never going to come into effect, right? So they have this ability to talk about these kind of outrageous things, and they get everybody who has a sound mind that looks at things from, because you've got people, that's what they're doing, and they're just playing with us, right? It's like, you've got all these people who hate big corporations and the fact that they don't pay any taxes. And so they give you this, and who are they going to vote for? They're going to go vote. They're going to be swallowed up into voting Democratic, while you've got small business people who are barely surviving and getting trounced by huge corporations who are going to say, what the fuck? There's no way I can afford this. If this came into effect, it would bankrupt us. Who are going to then think, I've got to vote Republican. And the more issues that they talk about, the more divided we become, because we end up on this sort of spectrum where we pick what interests of ours are better represented. And I think that what you'll see here in this next little clip is that they now start getting into how they are even defining these things as socialist and capitalist.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
To argue that the corporate tax rates in the United States are too high, or that, first off, let me just touch on the comparison you gave regarding progressive taxes in European countries versus the United States. I mean, yes, the taxes might be higher in those European countries, but what do people living in those countries get in return? They get incredible childcare. I mean, listen, the average American family, two-income household, spends a whopping 22% of their household income on childcare alone, right? So when you're talking about European countries that offer quality childcare, that, by the way, that opens up the opportunity for people to go to work, something that we should maybe think about as we're dealing with this labor shortage, 64,000 women left the job force in April alone. Not because they want to, but because they can't afford childcare. Everything in this country is privatized. Everything has a for-profit model. And there's consequences that come along with that, including for the business community that might want, you know, a more robust social safety net program, or social safety net to ensure that people feel comfortable enough to go to work, but we don't have that here. So yes, people might pay more in taxes, including those lower on the income scale, but what they get in return is far greater than what people in this country have been getting.
The United created enormous.
So, yeah, you know, Ben, he's like a little facts. He just like spits out little statistics.
I have to listen to him at half speed normally.
Right, and he just like, you know, like try to settle it down, Ben. Because I think, you know,
Two less cups of coffee.
I think the one thing you have to really be careful of, you know, and I think we're waking up to this as a whole because it's the age of AI. So we've all now, I hope you have come to realize that you can't believe anything anymore. Can't believe what you see. You can't believe what you hear. You could have a recording of anyone saying anything. You could have a video of them doing
a video, yeah.
Doesn't matter. Like you have to.
Yeah.
It's all an illusion now. And
You got to start trusting your intuition more.
And the one thing that we now retroactively need to start applying that same thinking to is statistics, because statistics have been doing that to us for decades, for generations. And so you have to be very careful. I mean, Ben says, well, according to the statistics, we gotta have.
You know what Mark
17,
Twain
17,
said
17,
about
this,
statistics? The
No,
Mark
no.
Twain quote?
No, what is it?
Mark Twain said, there's three kinds of lies. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Very good. Ahead of his time, that guy.
Yes.
And so, you know, like all statistics are debatable because you have to start wondering who did they talk to, where were they, who funded the study.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very careful when you hear statistics, but
Right.
but like Ben was just talking about how flatlined the economy of Europe was during this 40-year period while they were investing heavily in their social economy, and
Right.
he says that like, oh, clearly that's a bad thing. Clearly, if the economy is flatlining, that means it's a failure. But I think anybody who's spent any amount of time in Europe would say, like, clearly it's better. Clearly, the quality of life of people.
And people are more satisfied with their life and what the government's doing usually.
Yeah, right. And so, like, I don't think it has to be necessarily this. You know, they take these sort of polar opposite ideas where it's like I think
It has to be this or that.
I think childcare is a great example of it. You know, is, you know, yeah, like people. I don't know if that statistic is true, that 22% of people's income goes towards childcare, and I think probably so, because we've adopted this nuclear family for so long now in the United States, right? Where we just move away from our families and we live in other cities because we got a job, because of university, because of
Because we don't get along with our parents.
Yeah, and we have our own egos, and so we've dissolved the family structure that Ben's talking about.
The safety net, yeah.
And I think that Ben's point's great. You know, like here we live in Ecuador, and the family network here is phenomenal. I mean, the families are huge, and they take care of each other. Nobody pays for childcare here, right? Like there's any number of aunts who are happy to take care of the family. They love it. They don't look for money. They're just delighted to do it, and everybody shares income, and they share responsibilities, and the dollar is not so important. They don't live for it. They live for their families. And We're way away from that. Right, way away.
He makes a good point of what are you incentivizing, and I remember back in the day, I knew a lot of people, and I was myself for a time on welfare, and at the time, they paid the mother welfare money if the father wasn't in the home. And what happened a lot of the time was the father would leave the home so that the mother could get the welfare money, or he
Right.
would pretend he wasn't in the home and wasn't there for the home visits or whatever. But in many cases, it broke up the family in order to have this, this
Income.
welfare safety net, free money for not having to do anything. So,
But at the same time, like what Ben's talking about there, about incentivizing childcare.
right.
I mean, I'm not so sure if you thought about that as medical care. Like one of the things that I think is a human right to be healthy, and I don't believe that we should have privatized healthcare. You go to the United Kingdom and you look at the NHS and you say, if there's ever a doubt about what public healthcare can look like, it's the NHS. They've got the most advanced, incredible healthcare for all of the citizens. Nobody has to. There's deductibles, and the funny part is, people in the United Kingdom start complaining because they have a $35
Dollar
pound.
copay.
Yeah, it's pounds there, not dollars. But they say, oh, 35 pounds sterling to go to a specialist. Well,
To have an MRI.
What outrage! and I'll think to myself, mate, you don't know how fucking good you've got it. Because for me, I think, look, in a lot of ways, I think capitalism is. I think it should be the servant of democracy. I don't believe it should be the master of democracy. I believe it needs to be the servant. And
as well as the government should be the servant of the people.
yeah, and I don't think that everything has to be capitalist, right? And I think that healthcare is one of those places where everybody deserves to be healthy. And if I've seen so many documentaries where they follow different people from the United States and Canada, for example, and they both have a very common accent where you cut your fingers off with a skill saw. And in Canada, the guy goes to the hospital and they attach his fingers back, and there's not a question about it. Of course they're going to put your fucking fingers back on. In the United States, they have to the guys are thinking, which fingers can I afford to put back on my hand, because I can't afford to put them all back. No one should ever have to be in that situation. I don't care.
Well, obviously the pinky finger's not as important.
But nobody should be in that situation. I mean,
Right.
There shouldn't be an economic quotient when you're talking about the well-being of your health, and especially if you're talking about children or or elderly.
If you had a business, you do a mission statement, you do a vision statement, and you kind of, create the vision of what you want that business to be. And I think we need to do that for our countries, especially for the United States. We need to figure out, what do we want this country to be? And yes, it's probably going to be some blend of capitalism and maybe a little socialism for the healthcare and all that sort of thing. But what we don't get to vote on, and what, nobody ever looks at the 30,000-foot view picture of things, is that how are we spending our money? And are we spending the money, in a good way where we're getting a lot of bang for our buck and we're spending it on the most important things? We shouldn't have a country like the U.S. that has so many trillions of dollars running through its fingers, and we're giving it away to Ukraine and we're giving it away to other countries. And meanwhile, we've got the biggest homeless population we've ever had. We've got a lot of people who don't have health care or who have inadequate health care. Yeah. We've got, we're not like promoting the families to stay together, and, we had another video that got taken down about the missing trillions. We've also got the government stealing money from us as well. So, the average person, I think, should be able to vote on these things. What are our priorities? And most people's priorities, when they're looking at what they're voting for, abortion isn't at the top of the list, and transgender rights is not at the top of the list, but what affects their pocketbook and what affects their quality of life and is at the top of their list.
Yeah, right. And I think it's a great point you make, which is, it's become impossible to vote on anything. We're given consistently absurd arguments.
Even Congress doesn't get to vote on war anymore.
Right. It's just we're constantly going through this, and I think if you haven't watched the video that we've got on the Convention of States,
Yes.
I think Convention of States is really one way where we can sort
It's
of
our last hope, I think.
I think that's probably
It's
right.
a way to rein back the powers of the government and for the people to say, no more of these long-term limits in Congress.
Because I think, I think ultimately the way that these guys have framed this is not accurate. I don't think it's capitalism versus socialism.
Right.
I think it's unfettered capitalism versus grassroots democracy that uses capitalism to benefit the lives of the citizens that live within that country. And I think those two things are radically different, because I think it's demonstrably false that unfettered capitalism is democracy. It's a tyranny.
No.
It eviscerates small businesses. It destroys the environment. There's any number of huge
And
issues.
it's not pure capitalism. There's plenty of subsidies for big corporations and all kinds of stuff that the average small business doesn't get.
Well, because they are so big that they buy the political seats
Right.
of the people that are there. And
Right.
so when you have the ability to buy political power, you shouldn't be surprised that they've bought our government. And I think that moving forward, we have to start becoming a little bit smarter and a little bit more careful in our language and being able to say, no, capitalism needs to be able to serve a democracy. And that doesn't happen by letting really rich people make the decisions and pick who's going to be in office. It happens by making sure that what's important to you and important to me in my district and important to you in your district and important to your community stays important. Because I think if we went across America, literally congressional district by congressional district and state district by state district, and said, how many of these places give a fiddledy fuck about transgender rights or racial inequality? Like, we have all these issues that they're just thrown at us from the federal...
Or even just being at the top of the list. How many of them put that at the top of the
No
list?
way.
Whether they care or not.
They care about having good roads in their local community. They care about
being safe.
not feeling like they're going to get robbed. They want to have a great education for their kids. They want to have a robust sports teams. They care about the local environment, not in this great concept of the whole planet's falling apart, but they care about the quality of the river, the quality of the lakes in their area, the quality of the water, the quality of the land,
food,
whether they're inhaling chemicals from local places. They care about the stuff that's local to them, and there's no part of that needs to have federal intervention, right? There's no part of that needs the federal government to somehow step in. It's just a matter of the fact that they've gotten so big that we're in a position where we've lost control of the federal government. And
there's no accountability. Like if I ran my household budget like the federal government runs their budget, I mean, it's just ridiculous.
You'd probably be arrested.
So, we need accountability. We need to have audits on things. We need to have transparency. We need to see what's in Fort Knox. We need to see those financial records of the Department of Defense and the Housing and Urban Development. I mean, they have laws now where they don't have to disclose that to us. They can have all this secret stuff. Just call it, security. It's top security in
national
HUD.
Security. Yeah.
National security in HUD.
Federal court cases.
So they've just found all these ways to hide things from us, to trick us, and to rob us.
That's it. Well, we hope you enjoyed. I hope you guys had a good time, and I'm sure we'll touch back again.
Please like and subscribe and leave us a comment. We want to hear from you guys.
Yes, the silence.